Hi everyone, delonewolf here and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. And of course last week was pretty big when it comes to news, as the Triglavians have basically created their own region of 27 systems and cut them off from the regular gate system in EVE Online. That was pretty damn impressive to see, and now this creates like a new type of content that on one hand can easily be accessed if you use the new filaments, but if you want to go like a different route, you can also go through wormhole space. I've been actually hunting for a wormhole to go through trig space and I haven't found one yet, so it's pretty interesting. I'm definitely planning to visit there from time to time, and hopefully we can actually work on our trig reputations without hurting our Edencom reputations, albeit not through an exploit that apparently was put in the game by accident. Some of the old Rogue Drone content apparently gives you crazy reputations with both Edencom and the Triglavian. So we'll see. I'm gonna try to find my way there and then try to have some fun over there. In the meantime, the war in Nosik is raging as well. A fourth Keepstar was deployed and destroyed. Again, massive brawls, lots and lots of destruction. And so I think you can see from the ticker as well that Tritanium is now up even more. The resource changes have also gone live with the gate shutdown event, and as a result now it's gonna be pretty damn interesting, I think, to see what's happening in general with the minerals, because Megasite is up as well all of a sudden. So let's get started with a quick look at the New Eden store, as we always do, just seeing if there's anything special to report here. But nope, it's the same as the last couple of weeks at this point. Zento Isideco combined skin front and center for Caldari ships, and nothing special to report on sales or anything like that. Now, CCP did just announce that we're gonna get the Phoenix quarter now with a lot of special events, so I do think that they're holding off on the sales until those events actually hit, and then we should see some stuff on the New Eden store, I think. That means that we get to dive straight into the market, and we're gonna start with plex and stuff coming in at 2:30. Like that. Alright, let's start with plex itself. After a nice little bump last week that went up to pretty much 2.8 million, I think we're hesitating again, but right at the tail end you can see that we are starting our upswing yet again. So for now the plex prices are going for over 2.8 million in JITA, a little bit below 2.7 million for the buyers, and competition stays above 2.8 million in the perimeter trade hubs. That's pretty cool to see. And then down here the buyers, yeah, same thing, they stay just below 2.7 million. So a bit of hesitation in the market, but I'm still seeing this as the plex market wanting to go up in price. It's just not sure how quickly it wants to do that, and apparently this rush here in these 10 days or so was a little bit too much too fast. Then we have our multiple pilot train certificates that show that same pattern. Bit of a jump about a week ago, went up to 1.4 billion, and then we see that hesitation in the last couple of days again. A little bit below 1.4 billion for the sellers, and buyers, well, there's not a lot of buyers of this particular item. 1.1 billion for the first one, a billion for the next one, and then in JITA it goes down to 142 million for people that are basically hoping that someone makes a mistake with a lot of zeros and that they can profit off of that. In the Tranquility Trading Tower we do see quite a few more buyers coming in, and they go up to almost 1.3 billion ISK as well. So that margin closed massively, and the trade basically gone from JITA for 4 and now in the Tranquility Trading Tower. After that, we always take a quick look at the skill extractors that of course follow plex very closely. So we have that same overheating here, went up to 330 million ISK on a daily average price. Now we have our hesitation period right now, and we're selling them for 314 million, buyers coming in at 307. Very narrow margin here in JITA. Do buyers go up even higher? Yeah, 308 million in the Tranquility Trading Tower. That's a super narrow margin, again a bit of a sign of hesitation. Volumes are decent, so I do think we could go up from here. Let's take a look at the impact on the skill injectors then. Continuing a slow burn down away from 700 million ISK. I did not expect that, but yeah, 697 million for the sellers, 653 million ISK for the buyers. This does seem to be pressure on the price because of a lack of demand. Buyers are able to pull away. If you remember, when we were really in the period where we had these small little bumps and this hesitation period, what we would see was very narrow margins between sellers and buyers. This has opened up to over 40 million ISK and goes up very quickly. So this is actually pretty impressive. It's closed again a little bit by the Tranquility Trading Tower, almost 670 for the buyers over here, but that is still a larger margin of like 30 million ISK here between sellers and buyers than what we had in the previous weeks. And so yeah, that's the pressure that's building here. Sellers are trying to stay at that 700 million range, but really not able to do so. But you can see how many orders are in that very same region. It takes quite a bit of browsing to actually get the 700 million mark. It is the buyers that are opening up that margin decently quickly. So a lack of demand here. Let's see if it's the same thing in the small scale injectors. This one is actually landing, it seems, on 140 million ISK. It's just below that for the sellers now though, so that's interesting. Again, quite a bit of pressure on the sellers, and then 132 million for the buyers. That is not a big margin, but I think also opening up a little bit. And then again, 132, 132, 131, 128, 127, 123. Look at the difference in how quickly the price here in the buyers goes down compared to how quickly or how slowly I should say the price goes down in all of these sell orders. There is less demand, and that is putting that pressure that we're seeing here, and it's been going on here since September, after we finally crawled out of the 1 year low point. Next up, we'll take a quick look at the daily alpha injectors that were doing their own thing and actually jumped up to a 1 year high point here in October. Went up to about 45 million. It's pretty impressive. We're still almost there, just below 45 million for the sellers, and the buyers are coming in at 40 million ISK. So a bit of a recovery after that massive spike all of a sudden. Crossing September to October, we went up to that high point. You can't maintain that price indefinitely. Even that increase, of course, is not maintainable either, and so the market settles down a little bit, but definitely at a pretty good price, just below 45 million for the average. So completely different from the other injectors that are under pressure again on a lack of demand. It looks like the daily alpha injectors are doing quite well. Let's take a quick look here at that evolution. 44 to 45 million, so that's just a million here, and that's a little bit less, a little bit more I should say, 1.5 1.8 million between sellers and buyers on one page, but there's a bit more balance in its demand supply situation, despite the fact that we went up to a high point here just about 2 weeks ago. So daily alpha injectors, pretty impressive, and really showing that this is its own market. It has its own customer base, the alpha clones of course, and at the moment more popular than the general injectors for all the other players. Finally, we have the hypercores that are seesawing their way up and back above 300,000 ISK at the moment. So 295,000 for the sellers in the Tranquility Trading Tower. So it looks like here trade in JITA may still be dominating. 306,000 in JITA 4.4, 277,000 for the buyers. A little bit of increased activity perhaps and demand in the Hypernet relay. You also see volumes here went up a little bit on this, and then compared to what we saw for instance in August, we definitely have higher volumes going on at the moment. Interesting to see this as well. A sign for me personally that general activity is up in the game. Next up, the minerals. Let's take a look at those at 9.05. And you may already have seen it, and I mentioned it here from the ticker. We are continuing to climb towards 10 ISK on a tritanium. So you can see that we had the announcement right here that tritanium is going to become a mineral exclusively mined in HiSec. So we had this jump up to 9 ISK. Market really not sure where to go, but wasn't willing to retread the 1 year high point of 10 ISK just yet. But now, I think it is also because of all of the destruction that's happening in 0.0. 0.00, we are talking 9.95 pretty much for the sellers of titanium in JITA 4.4 and 8.93 for the buyers. So this is a bit of a margin opening up, but it's clearly showing supplies either going down or that cartel mentality that starts to take over a little bit. You have to move your titanium to JITA. That's actually either quite logistically heavy, or it's definitely more work than what we had before the gates shut down for a lot of players. And so they have their price and they want that price, and it's getting closer and closer to 10 ISK. And the more people are willing to actually just pony up that ISK, the higher this average price goes, which is definitely starting to climb yet again. The more emboldened they'll feel, I think, these sellers of titanium, and the higher they'll drive the price up, even if buyers are staying below 9 ISK at the moment. Now, there's still some inertia in the system. You can clearly see that away from JITA prices still have to catch up, but it's pretty much inevitable that is going to happen. So titanium, let's actually go without the filter here. 991 for a seller that just came in while I was talking, but yeah, it's 995, and you can see 10 ISK already showing up on the front page for the sellers of titanium. Let's take a look at the impact for pyrite, continuing its rise. Yeah, that's very impressive. So here the market on the announcement decided, all right, should we go 6, 7, 7.5, again retreading the high price that we were trading at when CCP first actually announced the resource crunch that was happening in EVE Online. And now, nope, it's all far worse than we thought. 14 ISK for pyrite, 12 ISK for the buyers, and then yes, 14 sellers of pyrite, 10 ISK for titanium. The first time in a very, very long time that, oh, excuse me, I just misclicked right there, that the inversion between pyrite and titanium has been recovered, basically has turned around again. Pyrite, which normally has a lower volume per metric ton of ore, or however you want to describe that, then titanium, was cheaper than titanium, a situation that of course was not really intuitively normal, but that was just the situation. And for the first time now, we are back with pyrite selling for a higher price than titanium. Very, very cool to see in my personal book here. But this is also a massive jump in, well, of course, a mineral that's not used as much as titanium, but this is going to increase production costs and thus value for Tech One stuff quite substantially again. Next up, let's take a look at Mexalon, back to a one-year high point as well, above 100 ISK, 106 for the sellers and 99.09 for the first buyer. Very, very impressive as well, of course. Mexalon, when it was moving in the 50, 60, 70 range right here, was actually at its historically normal price. I think Mexalon had a bit of a unique advantage that it became one of the first bottlenecks in 0.0 production. While they did become self-sustainable in a lot of ways, Mexalon became their first shortage. And so Mexalon was actually able to maintain a historically good price, 75 ISK, I think across the board, across almost the entire history of EVE Online, definitely in like the 10 years that I've been playing EVE Online, that was a great and is a great price for Mexalon. So here, what I am seeing is that the resource crunch is putting some of these minerals to pretty much unseen trade price. Now, perhaps before my time, Mexalon could have cost 100 ISK and everything was super expensive, but keep in mind, of course, that the amount of stuff that you could make would have been a lot lower in that period as well. And so seeing 100 ISK, again, showing now how valuable it is to have miners, to have logistics that can actually bring minerals to the right places for industry. And so this is increasing basically the cost of producing stuff, which CCP has said their goal was to increase the value and the loss, the meaningfulness of loss in EVE Online. This is definitely doing that to, for me, never before seen prices for Mexalon, basically. And this is going to again massively impact the importance of trade in EVE Online, of producing stuff and then moving it to the right place. So for me, this is very, very interesting. Mixelon above 100 ISK, super impressive. After that, we have the Isogen market that jumped up to 60 ISK last week and is actually pulling back a little bit. So here we also have an inversion. You're making less Isogen per cubic meter of ore than Mixelon normally. Mixelon going above 100 ISK and Isogen trading for 54 for the sellers and 50 ISK for the buyers. Now here, I still think that this is inertia in the system. Isogen has become something that you really need to get to low SEK in order to make it, and we still see 20 million here, 14 million units here, another 10 here, another 84 million units here. My read on the Isogen situation is that it's still massive stocks out there that are, able to crush this market very quickly, because, well, they're seeing 50 ISK. Haven't seen that in years for Isogen. All right, I'm dumping my stock. Someone else sees 60 ISK. Whoa, that's an incredible chart, an incredible margin on everything that I've been keeping in stocks for 4 years now. All right, I'm dumping whatever I've got, and that eventually becomes a little bit too much, and this drives the price back down to 50, which is what's happening right now. But eventually, I feel like those stocks will deplete, and I'm not sure. I mean, I don't have any concrete information, but I do think that CCP has to be a little bit careful with that. I think that perhaps these inversions are part of the metrics that CCP is watching closely. Clearly with Pi right now, they've succeeded in returning the aspect back to price cost compared to volumes that you normally mine. So pyrite up above titanium, but for Mixelon and Isogen, if you have to wait for all of these reserves of Isogen to be depleted, you could really put everything else in trouble before that happens. So be a little bit careful with absolutely needing Isogen to be back above the Mixelon price, I would say, and definitely keep an eye on the whole picture before you're saying this has to be resolved before we consider our resource problem to be solved. But perhaps it is something also that CCP does not look at. Perhaps they have completely different metrics, of course. But for now, Isogen, the one that is still lagging behind the most. Also, in all of these months of doing EVE Talk, I always considered Isogen to be the biggest casualty of the resource bonanza, the one mineral that was so overabundant that it just became dirt cheap for what it used to be. And the amounts that you can normally mine. And so this is already a pretty massive resurgence, of course, from like less than 15 ISK up to 50 at the moment. But yeah, it does feel like it is still lagging behind because of big reserves out there. After that, we have the Noxium chart that is staying well above 1000 ISK and is slowly climbing to 1250, 1254 for the sellers and 1216 for the buyers. Another mineral that is now exclusive to LowSig, and this one I've even seen it mentioned on one of the Talking Station streams. I believe that this also became a bottleneck, a problem mineral in nullsig production. If they wanted to keep their factories up and running at full speed, they needed to import Noxium. And while there are still massive stocks out there, I think a lot of these are a bit more strategic, and that it doesn't suffer as badly from oversupply and old, especially oversupply from old reserves, as Isogen does. And so it's back on a historically normal to very good price. I would practically put that in the same situation as Noxium, as Mixelon. This is definitely an incredible price, historically speaking, above 100 ISK. Noxium, well above 1000 ISK, is also a very good price. Not the very best we've seen, I don't think, but pretty damn good. 1254 for the sellers and 1216 for the buyers. Also, of course, a massive increase in, you could say, the value of Tech 1 stuff, the value of the general economy, but also the value of mining and the meaningfulness again of loss in EVE Online, of course. Next up, we have a couple that are now unique to Nullsec. Here is Zydrine, also working its way to another 1-year high point on all of this. 14 under disk for the sellers, 1340 for the buyers. Also, in my experience of playing EVE Online for about a decade, a normal price range for Zydrine. So that's pretty impressive. And then we come to our third inversion. Here is Megasite. You may already have seen that from the ticker. It is finally trying again as well to go back above 600 disk. In fact, sellers are at 613 and go to 620, 650, 720 decently quickly on just one front page. So again, supply wise, this is starting to become a bit of a problem. 568 for the buyers. They still want that cheap Megasite, but I don't think it's here for very long anymore. Same reason as with Isogen, Mexilon, Pyrite, Tritanium. Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine, and so this is perhaps again something that that we can expect to go in price, up in price quite substantially, especially in JITA. That needs to be to see imports from 0.0. That takes quite a bit of effort actually, and so that's going to become a cost. The price will be dominated by these sellers, and I fully expect this to get snagged up very quickly by people that need it locally for their production. And then, yeah, look at that. We don't have that much supply and we go up in price very quickly. So my expectation is for Megasite to catch up to Zydrine. Not sure if it's gonna be that bad. Perhaps there are some new Megasite sources still open that have kept this from increasing like Zydrine has, but Megasite used to be more expensive than Zydrine, not by that much. So it's not like I'm expecting Megasite to reach 2000, 3000 disk or anything like that, but there was definitely a higher range for Megasite than Zydrine. So we have one more left, of course. That is Morphite, that went up to above 40,000 ISK. That's kind of crazy as well. Back down a little bit, but still 31,400 ISK is an incredible price for Morphite. 27,000 for the buyers. So that's super expensive, especially if you keep in mind where have I historically been investing in Morphite. That's at a buy price below 10,000 ISK, so that's like a 200% increase. Pretty damn massive. If you made that trade, which was, well, not that long ago, about a month ago, you could have bought below 10,000 ISK and you could have just tripled your ISK on Morphite. Very, very impressive. Across the board, of course, I think it's pretty obvious. Minerals are up in price. Quite a few of them are actually at 1-year high points. Some of them are reaching historic high points in my experience. Now, perhaps I don't have a memory that's long enough when it comes to EVE Online, but this is definitely showing that mining is worth a lot at the moment, resources are worth a lot at the moment, and all of this will of course have a pretty big impact on the cost of stuff, and thus also on the meaningfulness of loss in EVE Online, which was, well, basically and is the whole goal of what CCP has in mind. We just don't know their metrics, and so from my experience, that's why I keep sharing them in every EVE talk. Yeah, Megasite and Zydrine still in an inverted situation. Isogen and Mexilon as well. Isogen used to be quite a bit more expensive than Mexilon actually, and to still see it be half the price, I think it's something that CCP does look at, and that will eventually, find itself at least a lot closer, if not back, the way it was, just like Pyrite already has this week, which is, I mean, this is a pretty massive spike that in the upcoming weeks is going to look pretty impressive, I think, on the charts. Let's move on to the PI market, coming in at 23.5. That's a lot of ISK, of course, flowing into the minerals, so unfortunately I don't see a resurgence of PI just yet, and Broadcast Notes is kind of confirming that. Average prices in the last couple of days going back down towards the 1-year low point of 1.6 million. It's 1.8 million for the sellers and 1.66 million for the buyers, so quite a bit of pressure here on the price. I'm again going to say a lack of demand. You can clearly see how little we can browse in demand compared to supply, and part of that equation at this point, it's not just a seasonal thing anymore, but it is, of course, if you increase the ISK needed and the value, how hard it is to get certain resources, everything else that is super passive and that basically remains as easy to supply as it was before, is going to decrease in value comparatively. That's of course how a market tends to work. There's only so much ISK in the game, and at the moment, yeah, it's flowing to minerals, so it's not flowing to PI. After that, we have the construction blocks that were able to get back above 10,000 ISK, but again, not able to maintain that. 10,400 still for the sellers, 9,200 for the buyers. This does also, that you get this average price well below 10,000 ISK with these sellers shows that there are people that are just saying, I can't wait anymore. I need to sell right now, and we're just dumping that to these buyers at 9,200 ISK. Consumer electronics at a 1-year low point, a bit of a bounce from there. I think some investors are keeping a close eye on this and trying to really snag the cheapest stuff. But we're still below 10,000 ISK for the sellers, 6,600 ISK for the buyers. That is extremely low, of course, and that is a sign that despite the fact that we do see a decent amount of buy orders, the margin here is so massive that you can only read this as a lot of opportunistic buy orders and still a lack of real demand for consumer electronics. Coolants was struggling before and is still doing so, so staying well below 9,000 ISK at this point. 9,000 for the sellers, 8,400 for the buyers. Yeah, look at this full 1-year chart. Now this was actually an incredibly good period for coolants, very expensive because this is very easy to produce on a very common gas planet. 10 to 11,000 is probably more of its normal average range, but again then we're going down substantially in price and we're staying very close to these low points, which would be bad news for fuels, but you can probably already have seen that on the ticker as well. All fuels shot up, so at the end I was planning to do freighters. I'll do freighters, but we'll also take a quick look at what's happening with fuels, and definitely something that I don't really know what's happening there, so let me know in the comments why fuels are spiking all of a sudden. Is it because ice has been cut down so much all of a sudden that they're expecting problems there? We'll see. Here are the cryoprotectant solutions still hovering pretty much on its average price if you disregard the March-April bubble. You could say not really a bubble, but this was increased demand due to new implant set that CCP introduced. 125,000 for the sellers, 110 for the buyers. I'm waiting for this to crash down below 100,000 before I invest, hoping for new implant sets. That's not happening right now, so very interesting. Exactly the same thing that I'm keeping an eye on. The market seems to be willing to maintain a higher price on those goods as well, so you don't see this incredible drop-off in the cryoprotectant solutions in those that have this pattern with a March-April bump due to new implants. Enriched uranium tried to get back to 12k, but yeah, here that last week crashing back down to its 1-year low point. 11,300 for the sellers, less than 10,000 ISK for the buyers. That is obviously again a lack of demand. Integrity response drones on big volumes, that's interesting, dropping down on big volumes to okay. And it's not, the availability is not even that great. Let's take a quick look at the perimeter trade hub. Nothing that special. 2.2 million for the sellers, but 1.6 million for the buyers. So I'm not sure how this volume spike can be explained with 3, maybe even 4 times the normal numbers, crashing the price down. But it looks like there is just a complete lack of demand. Okay, no, we can actually explain that. Someone dumped their holdings and they dumped everything to these buyers, to whatever was above this. And so that is what crashed the price, despite the fact that availability doesn't look that great either. But basically all of the demand up to 1.6 million was just filled with maybe one big seller like, I'm dumping everything right now. It's gone. Very, very interesting. We don't see that very often, but this is pretty impressive actually. Next up, we've got the mechanical parts climbing back from a 1-year low point again. 9,600 to 10,000 ISK for the sellers, but 8,600 for the buyers. Again, this is the buyers, including the Tranquility Trading Tower. So not enough demand at the moment. Nanites is another one with a lovely March-April bubble, and again able to maintain its price range decently well. 5,700 for the sellers, for a couple, and then buyers coming in at 5,700, again indicating that there is some impatience in the sellers and there is that lack of demand. that is starting to be frustrating. So this is another one. Of course, I keep an eye on this one for implants again, but I'd love to buy below 5k. Nano Factories also pulling back here, back below a million ISK on the average price, 1.1 million almost for most sellers, 950,000 for the buyers. So again, dumping happening to those buyers. Organic mortar applicators, man, moving all over the place from about a million down to 800,000 ISK. We're talking a million for the sellers, 850,000 for the buyers. Again, buyers, real demand, it's not really there. All of it is there to catch really low prices. Recursive computing module also breaking down here, heading back to the 1.25 million low range on the demand. 1.4 million for the sellers, 1.23 million for the buyers to get this average price. Again, big volume, big dumping happening to those buyers. Robotics continuing the bad news, of course. 77,000 for sellers. I don't think I've seen robotics this low ever. 73,000 for the buyers. Yeah, this is of course a chart that is indicating some real problems, and it's an outflow as well of the ISK, as I've said at the start. Self-harmonizing power cores staying well below average as well. Again, the lack of demand is pretty obvious. Sterile conduits going back down. This one did really well in September, able to hold a 1.3 million around the normal price range, but it's basically not sustainable, down to 1.2 million now for the sellers, a million for the buyers, going down very quickly. So here again, the lack of demand. Yukomi superconductors, February, March bubble, again tied to the implants, and yeah, the one exception here, able to do really well compared to the start of the year, still going for 88,000 ISK, buyers at 66,000 ISK. So that's very impressive. This one category of PI tied to implant production is still holding on, while all the others, advanced PI for structures, down the drain, fuels, really not well since the summer, in fact. And then just the more general stuff that I don't really know how they flow, but construction blocks, consumer electronics, all of that stuff, yeah, not doing well either. Finally, we get to it with our mainframe, same slow burn away and well down below the averages. 1.75 million for the sellers, 1.63 million for the buyers. Again, this is how we can browse for the buyers, and then here are all of the sellers. Yeah, that's PI, guys. Not much that we can do about that right now, I don't think. If CCP wants to increase the value of activity in the game, you can of course expect that market forces are going to drive the value of PI, a very passive source of resources, way down, and that's exactly what's happening now. It is of course all being exacerbated by the jumps that minerals are doing at the moment. Next up, advanced moon mats at 32.15. Let's first of all take a quick look at the ones for production of Take 2 stuff. This one is now also for me a little bit of a barometer to see what may be happening to trade hubs. I do think that there are regional differences to how and where you can produce specifically this first part of advanced moon materials, and so I think that this is probably a very good barometer for trade and for what's potentially happening with different trade hubs here. So crystalline carbonite for Galente Tech 2 production, a bit of pressure but staying at a very reasonable 150 range. In fact, 158 for the sellers and 151 for the first buyer. That is definitely not a bad situation considering where we were this summer. So it looks like this one is maintainable in volumes as well, and the price though is up a little bit from a couple of months ago before the fall of Nyaja. Next up we have the Caldari titanium carbides, actually down a little bit in price, so a little bit less than average here, but able to hold on to around 160 ISK, 162 for the sellers, 150 for the buyers. So a little bit of a lack of demand that is still showing. That's also something that advanced moon mats is suffering from, and part of the explanation again is gonna be minerals. But here, decently steady supply, good volumes. Titanium carbide seems to be available as before, which could of course be normal considering that JITA is in the middle of Caldari space, or not necessarily in the middle, but in Caldari space. So next up then we have our 3.1 Ferrite carbide for Minmatar ships, and this one is still suffering from the big wavy actions from the nullsec war, so that has a very big impact potentially on advanced moon materials here. As you see, the first war spike up to 200 ISK in July, then the second one here up to 175 late September, and so we're recovering and over recovering from that a little bit again, back to 136 for the sellers and 123 for the buyers. Availability seems to be quite okay, volumes pretty much average, so to my surprise looks like Ferrite carbide supplies have really found their way to JITA. And then finally we have our tungsten carbide for a Martic 2 production. That one is down in price, but here I'm also starting to see a little bit of lower volumes. At least that's my read on the chart, which could actually also be normal on these low prices compared to where we were basically for the rest of the year. 175 still for the sellers, 165 for the buyers. That's kind of strange to get this chart. Then it does mean that a lot of supplies are going straight to these buyers, and this supply is starting to dry up actually. Look at that. That's quite the inverse from crystalline carbides, right, where you can browse a lot more than this. Let's take a quick look. I'm actually now interested in the okay, that's also starting to invert, right? Look at all of this production. Obviously Caldari ship production close to JITA must be pretty impressive to see compared to this supply. That is starting to convert, and it's really visible in tungsten carbide, despite the fact that it's at a low and below average price. Supplies are drying up, going up in price very quickly potentially, and these buyers, they're still here, right? 165 down to 162. Interesting. We're gonna have to keep an eye on all of this. I'm still not sure what to make of it, but this is a bit of surprise to me to see this low of supply. Or maybe I should do Tranquility Trading Tower. Nope, that's not really the impact either. Although this is big, of course, 14 million units here at 180. So there's a bit of competition from there, but that's not really the big move. So that is interesting. Next up, the metamaterials then. Again, we'll start with Galente, which is photonic 1.2, going back down in price. Volumes going down as well though. And right now we're talking 13,000 for the sellers, 12,000 for the buyers. And here we have that oversupply that is pretty damn obvious. Volumes are down on lower prices, so nothing to panic about just yet. 2.2 non-linear metamaterials for Caldari, able to maintain its price range for the week. Volumes seem pretty normal. 21,500 for the sellers, 21,000 to 20,500 for the buyers. Pretty normal regular activity. Yeah, take two Caldari ship production and other production must be doing pretty damn well at the moment, where Galente maybe suffering a little bit. After that we have plasmonic metamaterials for Minmatar. So first we had the same wave due to the war, but then yeah, we've basically absorbed all of that with hardly any move, and we're staying below 20k, so below average. 18,000 for the sellers, 17,500 for the buyers. Availability, I'd say demand is decent, availability as well, and volumes here pretty normal again. And then finally we get our terahertz metamaterials for Amar that climbed back from a 1-year low point and are already under pressure again. Volume wise slightly less, but it's not that bad. 18,500 for the sellers, 17,400 for the buyers, and this again looks like it's decently in line when it comes to supply and demand. And I'm not sure about this, guys, but if I would have to gamble on explaining how the Amar goods seem to be much more aligned supply demand wise, whereas Galente, Caldari feel a little bit oversupplied and it's still going at a lower price, I think it's possible that a lot of the industry activity around that specific Take-Two production is moving to Amar space. That's where the Amar ships are being produced. So we'll see. We still have to keep a close eye on that, but from time to time I'll need to make trips to Amar and try to analyze the situation there. Pretty interesting again. Let's take a look at the other advanced materials. Here are fermionic condensates, pretty much flat for the week, well below average. So that's basically again that lack of demand and that lack of available ISK that's starting to show up here. Ferrogel, same thing, back to 1 year low point. Fluorides landing on that 750, and are we going below that? 746 now for the sellers, 716 for the buyers, and still millions of units coming in. Yep, this is just 1 year low point and clearly showing that lack of demand. Hypersynaptic fibers bouncing back from a 1 year low point, so this is definitely nothing to write home about. This is not the comeback. This will be squashed very quickly, I suspect. Nanotransistors flat at a pretty damn low range. 4,000 disk for the sellers, 3,700 for the buyers. Yeah, we had 6,000 disk for most of the year. It's pretty much half the price. Phenolic composites also climbing back, but again, normally 2,000 to 250, and this is actually already a low range, I think, and now this is just kind of depressing from that perspective. 1750 for the sellers, almost 1700 for the buyers. It's not the 1 year low point, but it's still not great. And then our ceramic fibers back to 1 year low point. When it's not Tech 2 chip production, it is clearly struggling in the advanced moon materials at the moment. Let's move on to the Tech 2 chips then. 4010. And let's take a look at these. Well, there's no SEC action, so I'm expecting at least somewhat decent demand. But in the last couple of weeks, haven't really seen the big spikes happen. So let's take a look. Here is the Basilisk, 210 million ISK on the average price, 223 for the sellers, 192 for the buyers. It actually feels like a healthy range and pretty much on average for this ship at the moment. Next up, we have the Cerberus. Went to a low point at 200 million ISK, touched the chart here, more demand, and then we are actually up in price. All trade in perimeter. Yep, okay, that's interesting. First time that we see this. 224 million ISK for the sellers, 197 million ISK for the buyers. A bit of a possible trade, and perhaps if you could still be the one to sell at an even higher price in GTAF 4.4, Cerbri are just gone from the market. Perhaps the chart still has to catch up on exactly what is going to happen. We've never seen this before. Not a single Cerberus available in GTAF 4.4. That's kind of crazy. Let's take a quick look at the Guardian, also shooting up, must be nullsec related, not even seeing that big of a volume, but it must also be said we were at a 1 year low point for about a week, so that's not very sustainable. At some point the market moves, and yeah, we gotta go back to JITA here. 250 million for the sellers, 183 for the buyers. My holdings, I have a Guardian for 184. This is a worthy trade, this is pretty good. This is why we keep an eye on the Take 2 ship market, going up to 250. It's a little bit shy, right? We've seen better spikes, but we're also coming from a lower price point than in the last year. So this is great. If you have followed that trade and you could have bought way lower than my 184, then this is a good time to try to sell your Guardian. I hope you didn't buy like a dozen of them, because that's going to crash the price down very quickly. But there it is. The Guardian trade can be materialized right now. Next up here we got the Hound, staying flat below 25 million. Yep, less than that for the sellers, 23 million for the buyers. Probably still a little bit early. I managed to buy a Hound for 22.5 including taxes, but we're staying away from, again, these lovely spikes. I mean, it doesn't happen every single month or week or something like that. You need a little bit of patience in this, but that's the situation. Iquitursa next, shooting up in price. Okay, another little spike. We were below 400 million ISK. We're now selling for 487. Honestly, that's almost tradable. That's pretty impressive to see that the Iquitursa Triglavian Tech 2 ships is actually starting to show the Tech 2 waves as well. And I actually need to drink here for a moment. Sorry about that. But my throat was really drying up all of a sudden. So Iquitursa, second spike you could say in as many months here, and yeah, if you bought well below 400 million ISK, which I think was possible just about a week ago, then you already have a trade on your hands here. impressive. Feels risky, of course. $500 million is pretty much for a heavy assault cruiser. But yeah, if then you get a 20% return, that means a lot of ISK, of course, compared to, for instance, the Hound. The Ishtar is continuing to struggle, showing, in my opinion, because the Ishtar is just so relevant both in PvP and PvE, that the advanced movements situation is also, it has driven the cost down quite substantially for a lot of producers. That's maybe ending at the moment, right? We did see prices back on their average ranges, but there's probably still a little bit of the old cheap materials that are going through the pipeline. 212 million for the sellers, 198 million for the buyers. If you look at this average chart, usually an Ishtar costs more than 280 million, so this is pretty inexpensive at the moment. Manticore continuing the stealth bomber struggle here, back towards 25 million, 25.6 for the sellers, 24 million for the buyers. Not a lot of demand here either, so I usually make good trades with these stealth bombers. For now, this is, definitely not moving as well as the Guardian just did, for instance. The Munin is staying flat below 200 million ISK, buyers at 186 million, same story as a couple of weeks ago. I would say if you want to invest in a Munin, it's definitely the right time to do so. If you look at this chart, you may need to be a little bit patient for a sell order, and don't go too crazy with your volumes. It could definitely happen, right? This is still a Nosek doctrine as well. Next up here we've got the Nemesis. Again, that was a decent spike from a low point of 20 million ISK up to 27.5 million. We're back on the in-between spots. 23 million for the sellers, 21 million for the buyers. Am I still holding any of these? Nope. The Onero's next, continuing its struggle. 164 million for the sellers, below 150. Again, just like with the Munin, if you want to be ready for, an Onero spike, which may happen on a big Nosek battle, where all of a sudden that needs to be replaced, you could definitely buy one right now. The Panther, still staying above average, I'm gonna say, almost 1.2 billion for the sellers, 1.1 million for the buyers, and it's a decent amount of them above a billion. So looks like the rebalancing has brought Panther back a little bit, and yeah, there's some interest in the ship. Then we have the Purifier bouncing back from 25 million, so here we had a good opportunity to buy some cheap ones. I bought 22 million including taxes. Yeah, buyers up to 24, sellers are at 26.5. It's not a tradable spike just yet, but yeah, I'm hoping that the Guardian will lead the way basically. For the Scimitar, getting back to 200 million ISK average, 203 for the sellers, but still 182 for the buyers. That's still quite a bit below that. Let's get 180 on the chart here. Not as good price-wise as the Oneros, of course, on the chart, but volume-wise, this is a little bit less risky on that end. So again, you could, if you don't have one already, you could consider buying a Scimitar. The Widow, that's interesting, going below a billion ISK on the average price. 1 billion for the sellers, less than a billion for the buyers. Super narrow margin at around a billion, which I would call a little bit below average. I think this, just like with the Ishtar, is showing a sign that there is some cheap production that is still happening at the moment, that is driving the general Tech 2 cost down. But right now, of course, we're probably at a turnaround point where even the Tech 1 part of these ships, which normally it requires some stuff. Let's take a quick look at industry here. Right, it does require titanium, pyrite, Mexilon, Isogen, Noxium, etc. So I think that this is starting to that this will start to be felt in their production costs as well. But yeah, construction blocks super cheap, of course. Morphite up in price, that's gonna start to hurt as well. And then all of this stuff is normally, I'm actually gonna take a quick look at this. I'm learning this stuff myself as well. But yeah, here it is: titanium carbide, some nanotransistors, not really that much, and hypersynaptic fibers. This is the stuff that was of course super cheap and abundant, and so this is probably what has driven the price down substantially. But now I think the other components are going to stop this from really crashing to low points or anything like that. There is still that mineral part of Tech2 production as well. Finally, we've got the Zealot that is slightly moving up, but still only very shyly. I bought one too early at 187 million. It's up to 205 for the sellers, but still less than 180 for the buyer. So if you want to follow this trade as well, if you want to grab a cheap Zealot, you can still buy well below my own price point. But yeah, Guardian, guys, I mean, I'm maybe even willing to hold on to that a little bit longer because I have actually also been training it towards the logistics a little bit, so it could be interesting to have my own Guardian available. But right now you can sell at a very good profit if you followed my holdings and if you bought like less than a month ago. So that's pretty damn juicy. A Tech2 trade, that's good news. Let's hope that the others can follow suit as well. Let's move on to the Tech3 ship market at 49.20. So here I was kinda expecting everything to normalize again in the tactical destroyers. Here are the Confessor still below 40 million ISK. That was a little bit oversupplied last week, getting closer to 40 million, and this supply is right in line. I would say that's definitely, in fact, in the last couple of days, that's really not much. And then 35.5 million. This is pretty much the regular stuff, could perhaps be slightly undersupplied, but definitely feels okay. Heckgate chart, that's probably the reason. Where is the supply going? That's towards the Heckgate that all of a sudden shoots up to 65 million ISK on complete lack of availability. Buyers are only up to 44 million, so be careful of expecting this to become a massive ripple again. We've seen this before. I think it was with a Jackdaw spike that was absorbed very quickly. But this is of course the war showing up in the tactical destroyers. There must have been a pretty good purchase happening for some Nullsec Heckgate fleets. They've had that buff. These are very strong brawlers, getting close and personal. Use blasters with the boosted Tech2 ammo, and you've got crazy damage. So this is apparently in the meta right now. If you have some cheap Heckgates, definitely bring those to the market right now, because it could be that will dive back down. One thing must be said though, we'll take a quick look at availability. So that's next to none. This is going to absorb normally quite a bit of not just reserves, but also production. And so the Confessor already not doing too well. If we had 30s and 40s here strewn throughout these sell orders, I would say, yeah, we're going to easily ride this spike out. But now I'm not sure. Let's take a look at the Jackdaw next. Still flat below 40 million ISK as well, but availability here is going to be important. Last 24 hours, not a lot. 42 here, 22 here. This is more the availability that I was expecting to see in the Confessor. So here, that's yeah, we can actually browse down quite a little bit more. So the Jackdaw should be fine. The Confessor may be impacted by this Heckgate spike, but let's keep one thing in mind. We had one, where the hell, what it was actually a Confessor spike here. We had this happen before. The Confessor actually jumped to 80-90 million ISK, and despite this here, if we then look at the Heckgate chart, that one was actually still going down. Despite that just happening there, the Jackdaw pretty much flat. So don't expect necessarily too much from this Heckgate jump. If there's one ship that I would say could increase in price because of it, it would be the Confessor, because that one, this supply doesn't feel that well. I think that's a little bit too low. And then the Jackdaw has decent supplies. I think that one will ride this wave decently easily. And finally, we've got this Vapel that is down to a lower range right here, 35 million on average, 37.5 for the sellers, 31.5 for the buyers. And this could be basically the wave breaker. A couple of hundred Vapels is of course going to indicate there is zero reason to make Vapels. We can focus on the Heckgate, we can focus on a bit of the Confessor, and as a result, I think that this If this was higher, towards the 40 million range, or not that much availability, I'd give it a high chance that the Confessor will increase in price. Now I think that this could basically again be a wave that gets flattened very quickly by supply, by reserves, and that the others will hardly see an impact from it. I could be wrong on that, but that's my read on the market because of what the Jackdaw still has in reserve and what's happening here with this Vapor market. That's way too much. We'll see in the upcoming weeks how that evolves. But interesting, of course, if you have some Hecates around that you could sell, definitely try to do so. Our cruisers next. Here it is finally happening. Oh my god, how long have I been waiting for that? Here is the Legion, currently selling for 166 million. I mean, it's incredible where it comes from, of course. We come from like 135 million or something like that. So that's very good news for people that bought at the right time. Buyers only up to 147 million. In my holdings, I have a Legion for 135. So that's a bit of a trade that I could make already. So a sudden spike, and again, I don't really have that much of an explanation, except that last week, of course, I was very vocal about saying that I don't understand how we can still be at these 1 year low points despite the fact that the availability was this bad. And so now all of a sudden we do have 20s over here. Perhaps this isn't again market manipulation. I would not be surprised if just a lot has been bought and just relisted from a certain price range. Competition starts over here again. That does mean that this spike could be very short-lived all of a sudden, but you don't need a lot of ISK to do this. Don't need a lot of ISK to bring that price up here all of a sudden. So if you're holding hundreds of Legions, you're probably gonna be disappointed by your returns. But if, like me, you've got one that you bought at 135, I can probably time the wave here and try to sell it for maybe 165, 164, something like that, and definitely take a profit on that one ship. But yeah, this again, I have no explanation why we were so low a week ago. I have no explanation why this spike happened. I think it's pure market manipulation because it is so small. Let's see if it's visible on anything else. Here is the Loki, still flat at 150 million. ISK 153 for the sellers, 138 million for the buyers, and I have one at Loki at 150. So we definitely need a spike here as well. If I want to take some profits on that, then the Proteus is going up in price. Okay, definitely above average at the moment. 165 for the sellers, 139 for the buyers. And this is much more in line with what I would expect on this kind of availability. But what is this? Maybe 10 ships less than last week when we were still down in the gutter. Or a month ago. I mean, it just doesn't make too much sense to me personally. And then the Tengu is up a little bit, but again, not that much either. Yeah, 145 for most sellers, 136 for one, 136 million for the buyers. Very, very risky market in my opinion. I think potentially I could do the Legion trade here. There's definitely some profits, but this is completely unpredictable in my book. I, by the way, have this Legion probably since since mid-June, so it's definitely not a fast trade either. You can do a lot better, in my opinion, in the Tech 2 ships. But okay, I'll probably try to sell that Legion now, take that profit, and then we'll wait for something like that to happen in the Loki market as well. This to me, again, don't have an explanation. It feels like manipulation. That's my story for Tech 3 Cruisers this week. Let's then move on to the extra products. I'm first going to show these, so we'll start that at 57. Okay. So I just noticed while making the ticker that this was happening in fuel blocks. Here are the helium fuel blocks, shot up to 22,000 from a less than 18,000. So that's a pretty significant spike to a 1 year high point. Hydrogen fuel blocks also back up to the 20,000 range. Nitrogen fuel blocks making its way back to 20,600 ISK, which is around here. Yeah, exactly. And then oxygen fuel blocks still in the process, I think. Oops, sorry. Selling for 20,000 ISK. So I'd love to know the explanation. I think it is going to be the even lower availability of ice in the mix here. It can't be PI. We just saw that one is still struggling quite heavily. But this is a pretty impressive comeback, of course. Some of them have increased by 4,000 disc, which is about a quarter of the price in a matter of just a couple of days. So this is a very cool spike. If you have the explanation, definitely put that one down in the comments. And then we're actually also going to take a look at the freighters. That's a request, kind of a request, you know. It was mentioned in one of the comments. I thought it was interesting. Last week we saw the battleships, how they had a nice upwards curve in value due to the mineral changes. It should be even more visible in an even bigger ship, of course. That's that you can fly anywhere, which would of course be the freighters. So where are those? I think it's in capital ships. Yep, there are the freighters. And so here is the Amar freighter, the Providence. This is the Providence chart. Bit of an anomaly here. That's unfortunately not showing this as smoothly as what we've seen before. But started the year at 1 billion ISK and is now selling for 2 billion ISK. That's double the price. Yeah, losing a Providence and actually getting into your Providence is quite a heavier proposition than a year ago. That's pretty impressive. Let's take a look at the Charon next. That's a better chart. That was kind of what we were expecting to see. Starts above 1 billion ISK, and then here of course February we start to see the impact of the resource crunch announced by CCP. We go up to a 1.5 billion, and then here at the tail end on our next resource crunch the price goes up to almost 2 billion ISK for the sellers, 1.8 billion for the buyers. Very impressive, of course. Then we have the obelisk, also shooting up, of course. Very same pattern up to January, February, going for about 1 billion ISK, a bit above that. Then we're up to 1.5 billion on the high points as resources become scarce, as the reserves are starting to be used. And then here at the tail end, pretty much no one expected it, but CCP is saying we're gonna go even harder on this. And here we go, obelisk. Almost 2 billion ISK for the sellers as well. Then we have the Minmatar Fenrir, a little bit shyer, always the situation. The Minmatar, you could say unfortunately, the least popular faction when it comes to the number of players. And so as a result, you do tend to be able to have slightly cheaper ships available here. Starts the year at 1 billion ISK and ends the year at 1.9 billion ISK. And then we'll also take a look at the Bowhead as well. Starts at 1.1 billion and is currently going for 1.8 billion, but the availability is next to nothing. So that is definitely a unique ship that's not as general use as, although it can be flown everywhere, it's not as general use as the good old freighters like the Providence Charon chart. I think is exactly what we were expecting here. Double the price, so a loss of one of these freighters of course means quite a bit more than about a year ago. Very cool stuff this week, of course, with the culmination of what happened with the Triglavians, resource changes coming in, minerals soaking up all of that ISK, really causing troubles across quite a few other segments of the market. And we'll keep an eye on that, honestly. Super interesting, and there are opportunities here, of course, but I also do feel like all of that is flowing to these minerals at the moment is taking away some of the potential volatility in, for instance, the Tech 2 ship market. That's something that I'm kind of noticing. We'll have to see how all of that evolves. But this is it for this week's EVE Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.